Lenny had always chased death, but for the first time, death was about to catch up. Lenny Voss was born into a family that lived on the edge. His grandfather had been an explorer, charting dangerous routes through uncharted jungles. His father had followed in those footsteps, leading extreme expeditions, but had settled into a quieter life when family obligations became unavoidable. And then there was Pete, Lenny's older brother, who had been the most fearless of them all. Pete had attempted the near impossible, to conquer Mount Hale, one of the deadliest climbs in the Himalayas. But the mountain had taken him. Lenny was 12 years old when they got the news. His brother had slipped, disappeared into the abyss, his body never found. That was the day Lenny's obsession with death began. He started small, rock climbing without ropes, running along rooftops, diving into frozen waters. But the true addiction began when he turned 18. Skydiving became his passion, but not the controlled kind. He would delay pulling the parachute until the last possible moment, chasing the thrill of oblivion. When that wasn't enough, he took tourists on guided extreme sports trips, until his recklessness cost him his license. Lenny didn't care. The legacy of fearlessness ran in his veins, and he refused to be tamed. Unlike his father and grandfather, he would not let love or responsibility dull his edge. He wasn't meant for a farm, for stability, for a family. He was meant for danger. And now, he was meant for Mount Hale. He stood at the base of Mount Hale, the wind howling like a chorus of ghosts. The nearly vertical ascent loomed above him, jagged and unforgiving. This was it. The climb his brother had never completed. The one his father never dared. It was the last challenge that could make him feel alive. At his side was Henna, his wife of only a few months. She had been his trainer, his confidant, and, as he believed, his greatest love. They had met through his reckless training regime, a rich woman with a taste for danger, mirroring his own thirst for adrenaline. But she had begged him not to do this. Lenny had promised her, promised his mother, that this would be his final endeavor before settling down. That once this climb was done, he would trade peril for peace. He had lied. The climb began easily. Lenny moved with the practiced grace of a man who had never known fear, his fingers gripping the frozen rock with unshakable confidence. Henna followed, her strength matching his, her presence steady behind him. For the first few hours, the mountain felt like it was bending to his will. Then, the storm came. Raging winds and a sudden drop in temperature turned the ascent into a battle for survival. Ice slicked the rock face, the air thinning as they climbed higher. Lenny pressed forward, refusing to turn back, but something gnawed at him. Doubt. He had spent years chasing something he barely understood, a legacy that meant nothing. His brother, Pete, had died on this mountain trying to impress their father. But their father was gone. Their grandfather was gone. What did their legacy matter if no one was left to see it? Who would remember them when they were just more bodies swallowed by the mountain? Lenny looked over his shoulder. Henna was watching him, her expression unreadable. He thought of his mother, still waiting for him back at the farm, the last piece of their family's past. "I want to turn back," he said, his voice barely audible over the wind. Henna didn't respond. She simply stared at him, her breathing steady. Then his footing slipped. Lenny's fingers scraped at the ice as his body lurched downward. He felt the rope jerk violently, stopping his fall, tethered to Henna, who was still secured to the ledge above. He dangled over a sheer drop, heart pounding, his eyes locking onto hers. She could have pulled him up. Instead, she smiled. He barely had time to process the betrayal before the blade flashed in her hand. With a single slash, the rope severed. Lenny plummeted. Lenny's body was never recovered. The storm buried him beneath the ice, just as it had his brother years before. News of his death sent his mother into mourning, her grief consuming her. Within a month, she too was gone. Hannah inherited the family farm. No one questioned her. A grieving widow, alone in the world, holding on to the last remnants of her husband's legacy. But there was something no one knew, something even Lenny had never suspected. The land beneath the farm held a secret, a fortune in stolen treasures, hidden long ago by a gang of ruthless thieves. Hannah had known all along. She had spent years trying to buy the land, but Lenny's mother refused to sell. So, she found another way in. She had poisoned Lenny's mother, the old woman dying without realizing the truth. Hannah had orchestrated everything, manipulating Lenny, feeding his obsession, leading him to the one place where no one would question his death. And now, with the funds at her disposal, she had work to do. The sons of Aryan had been scattered for years. But with their lost fortune reclaimed, Hannah could finally do what her father had started. The gang would rise again. And their first target? Everyone Paul ever cared for.